I'm Joe Lample. When I created Growing a Greener World, I had one goal: to tell stories of everyday people, innovators, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking leaders who are all, in ways both big and small, dedicated to organic gardening and farming, lightening our footprint, conserving vital resources, protecting natural habitats, making a tangible difference for us all. They're real, they're passionate, they're all around us. They're the game changers who are literally growing a greener world and inspiring the rest of us to do the same. Growing a Greener World, it's more than a movement, it's our mission.
Any gardener will tell you, the hardest part and the most work happens before you ever put that first plant in the ground. Getting ready for a new gardening season is exhausting, and there is no shortage of work. And I'm often asked, what do I do around here at the garden farm to get ready? What are those tried and true techniques for a productive, healthy garden and a bountiful harvest? So that's what we'll talk about today, some of my favorite ways to make that happen. And this year, I'm also raising the degree of difficulty, a lot, because this is the year that I'm also trying to grow something new, a love of gardening with my youngest daughter.
Amy is a teenager, and while she's watched Dad play in the dirt for her whole life, it's not something she's ever gravitated toward, or even really tried. So I came to her with a proposition. She loves the idea of making money of her own. So what if we started a business selling plants? For her, it's the opportunity to earn her own income. I figured it's the perfect way to expose her to gardening firsthand, and maybe even teach a few valuable real-world lessons along the way. Most important, it guaranteed some one-on-one father-daughter time over the next few months.
Our first order of business, literally, was for us to decide what our business was going to sell. And it didn't take long for Amy and me to settle on classic heirloom tomatoes.
The garden farm has great sun, and the conditions in our raised beds are excellent for tomatoes. But some of those harder to find varieties, tomatoes in unique colors or shapes, tomatoes with really specific flavor profiles, tomatoes with some history behind them, tomato plants that gardeners around here simply can't get at the big box store or even at the local nursery. If we can specialize in that niche, we've got a better chance of attracting a larger clientele.
I like that striped German. Look at that one. You want to get that one?
Yeah.
I love the color of it. So here we are scouring the internet for all our different tomato varieties that we're going to offer to our customers, and we want to have a great selection. A lot of the classic heirloom varieties, some of those great big slicers, maybe some unusual ones that people haven't even grown before, and of course some of those salad tomatoes like the yellow pear, and of course everybody's favorite sun gold. So it's December, and most people aren't thinking about that tomato that they're going to be putting on their BLT on 4th of July weekend. But you have to start in December, because this is when you order the seeds before they sell out, and you get them sown and grown out so that when people are ready to buy these plants, you have them ready. And that's why it's so important to get an early start. But because we're growing so many, we also have to order a commercial seed starting mix that comes in large quantities, because you just can't get that at your garden center or box store. So we'll order that online, and actually that will save us a lot of money, and it's a really fine quality product too. And just to mix it up, we're going to try some peppers and beets and eggplant and some salad greens. So that will give a lot of variety. And then one of the other things we want to do is provide some perennial flowers, so that we can promote the attraction of the pollinators and the wildlife, not only to the garden farm, but to the gardens of all of our customers as well.
Sowing begins in mid-January. It starts with quality seeds and a good seed starting growing medium. The key to germinating the maximum plants using the minimum space is to sow a lot of seeds into each cell of the seed tray. It's certainly an unconventional way for starting seeds, but for the many varieties we were growing, it was the perfect method for this stage of the process. The The seeds are generously distributed over the surface and lightly covered with more growing medium and then watered in.
Okay, 4 seed trays sown, about 80 left to go. But now all I need to do, at this stage at least, is to cover them up until the seeds germinate. And for tomatoes, that takes about 3 or 4 days. But the covering helps hold the moisture in, and that helps the seeds germinate. Now, this is my mudroom right outside my office and on the way to the garden. But really, any protected environment will do, whether that's a garden shed or a greenhouse. You just want a warmer environment. Seeds like tomatoes like a warm soil temperature around 75 degrees, so it helps to have a protected environment like that. I also have a heat mat under here that helps get those temperatures up. Now once the seeds germinate, the covers come off. The other important thing about this whole process for the next 6 weeks or so is proper lighting. Most people use fluorescent shop lights. I've used those for years. This time I'm trying LED lights. They are deceptively powerful, which is a good thing, plus they're very efficient. So time will tell, but I'm anxious to see how well these do. Now I also have fans that I use through here to help keep the air circulating. That's very important for the health of the seedlings. But other than that, it's just keeping an eye on them. Nothing else special about this. Normal trays. And then in about 6 weeks, I'll take them outside, and along the way, towards the end, I'll start to harden them off to toughen them up.
After about 4 weeks under the grow lights, our seeds had germinated, sprouted, and become actual seedlings. And that's the signal that it's time to bump them up. Transplant each of them from their tiny seed starting cells to their larger 3.5-inch pots that they'll be in all the way through to when we sell them. These are the containers our customers will take home to their gardens when they're ready to plant their vegetable gardens in the spring. The process can be a tedious one. There are hundreds and hundreds of seedlings. Each one has to be very gently separated from the others in its tray, pulled out individually, and plugged into new growing medium in its own new container, which it will have all to itself from here on out.
When I pitched the idea to Amy about starting this business, planting seeds and then selling the plants at the farmer's market and to customers through social media, I wasn't sure if she'd be agreeable to it. But when she realized that she might be able to make some money at it, she loved the idea. So then the process began, and I was really surprised at how she took to it. She enjoyed the process, the routine of just putting those seeds into those cells, and then when it was time to bump them up, I could not get over how she was into it. The first day she was 3 times faster than me, and the next day she wanted to know if we had any more seedlings that we could bump up. That's how into it she was. So I knew that the spark was lit, and she's taken off from there. And so now we are off and running, and I'm really excited about what I've seen so far, and I do hope that this sticks, but my gut tells me that it will.
Along with getting the plants used to their larger pots, it was also time to start getting them used to the great outdoors. It's a process called hardening off, and it starts at just 1 hour of daylight on day 1. The next day, 2 hours. On day 3, 3 hours, and so on, until the plants hit 8 straight hours of sunlight on day 8. It's a proven way to help the plants gradually build the strength to survive full time in the elements. But it takes some work. It means bringing all of your plants outside and then back inside each day. And for us, that was an hour of carrying trays of plants back and forth every day. It may have been tempting to leave the plants out a little longer for fewer total days, but we'd worked so hard to this point, we didn't want a shortcut to jeopardize our inventory. Hardening off will give us tougher, healthier plants, and that will result in happier customers.
Now, even after you've hardened off your plants, you can't leave them outside unassisted indefinitely. And while the hardening off process will definitely toughen up your plants for those full sunny days and the wind and the rain, it doesn't safeguard them from those overnight lows. So as you're prepping your garden for spring, keep an eye on those overnight temperatures because they can become dangerously low for those tender young plants.
An unseasonably cold spell in March and early April had us worried. I kept a close eye on the forecast and saw several nights with expected lows just below freezing. With our tomatoes already living outside in the raised beds, they'd need some help to make it through the cold overnight hours. After rigging up some temporary hoops with pieces of flexible PVC pipe, We draped the beds with lengths of shade cloth. It's not much, but it's just enough to trap a few degrees worth of the bed's warmth and keep our tomato plants alive under the protective cover.
So our target time for selling our plants is late April. That's after that last risk of frost has cleared this area and people start thinking about planting out their vegetable and their flower gardens. Now for many it could be as simple as setting up a card table at the end of the driveway and making a homemade sign and catching your neighbors as they pass by. Now for us it's going to be word of mouth, but we're doing a big push on social media to tease out all those great plants that we have. So hopefully people will leave some space in their garden for all the plants that we have to offer. And we're also trying the farmers market this year, but you really need to plan ahead and do your homework because there's a lot of work involved in getting all the permitting and the licensing in place so that we can be a vendor sometime down the road when that Saturday happens and we're ready to go. All right, that looks good.
And as we get closer to market time, the plants are getting bigger by the day. Free time after school and work is now spent trimming the plants of spent foliage to encourage only the best growth and get them looking their best.
So you remember when we stuck these little seedlings into these pots and there was just a couple leaves on them? Those are called the cotyledon leaves. Those are the seed leaves, and those are at the very bottoms of these plants. And well, obviously they've gotten a lot bigger now and all that new growth, but those tiny little leaves aren't needed anymore. They're the ugliest ones of all the new growth.
That's not nice.
Well, it's true. And we want everything to look good for our customers. So we're going to go through all these plants and I'll help you. And we're going to take our clippers and just cut those leaves out.
This is one of those steps that makes a lot of gardeners really nervous. It's counterintuitive in a way. You've nurtured these little guys along from seeds, and now they're miniature plants. Every bit of new growth feels like further validation of your gardening skills. So why would you purposely go through and cut off the brand new leaves that you've encouraged the plant to put out? Well, by removing the little leaves towards the bottom of the plant, it redirects the plant's growing energy into the big leaves up top, where the fruit will eventually appear.
So leave all the top growth, because see how nice and fresh and green and dark it is? That's what it's all going to look like. So we might as well get rid of some of that lower foliage because it's not needed anymore. And some of it's damaged from all that cold weather we had. It's kind of sunburned and dried out, so we can get rid of it.
But my work this spring isn't just helping Amy get her heirloom tomato plants ready to sell. I've got the entire garden farm to prep for its usual growing season too. And with 16 beds and about 1,000 square feet of garden space to be planted as soon as it's ready, there's no busier time of year than right now.
Before I ever put a single plant in the ground between seasons, the first thing I do is amend the soil. And all I do is add about 1 inch or 2 to the top of the existing soil. And I do that with my homemade compost or certified compost if I need to buy in bulk, or a composted product that I know, like, and trust and that I've used for a couple of years with great results. And I know that I have healthy soil for a lot of reasons because of the great output I get from all of my crops and how healthy they are throughout the season. But I can also reach in here between seasons when I have access to the soil just to check it out. And I can get my hands in here. I usually can pull up a lot of worms, and that's a great indication of healthy soil. So let's take a look. And it is so loaded with worms. So that's a great sign of healthy soil. And when you make your soil healthier, your plants are healthier, and everything about your garden is better off. So the moral of the story is, make compost and use compost in your own garden. So this is always a milestone moment in my gardening season every spring when I can place those tomato plants into the bed ready for planting. That is huge, and it's going to be a big year ahead. So this is a really exciting time. And this bed is going to house 4 of 32 varieties that I'm growing this year in the various beds. I'm dedicating these plants, or this bed, to Craig LaHoulier because these are actually plants that he named: Cherokee Purple, Cherokee Chocolate, Cherokee Green. and one that he bred, Lucky Cross. So Craig, here's to a great season. In this bed, we're sowing beet seeds, and if you read any seed pack or book, it talks about sowing root crops, including beets, directly into the soil because root crops don't like to have their roots disturbed, and that's the risk if you put them into pots. But I have to say, I've been experimenting with that lately, and so have a lot of you, is sowing those beet seeds directly into small containers, a few per container, allowing them to grow out and then thinning out to just one plant. And the beauty of that is, by the time it is ready to plant them outside, you've got one strong plant that you can place into the ground in even spacing for maximum efficiency and a healthy plant. And I'm using my planting board for that. What this allows me to do is space evenly. These notches are every 3 inches. In my case, I'm going to space them every 6 inches. That's going to give the plant the maximum chance to grow out and that beet to form the largest root possible. So I've got the best opportunity to make the most of my time and my space, and next time you're considering planting beets, give this technique a try too. You know, waking up the garden farm also means never missing an opportunity to add more plants, not only inside the vegetable garden, but all around the garden farm landscape. And blueberries are a favorite of mine, and I currently have about 20 just planted around the perimeter of the fence line, but I also have them all throughout the landscape beds because they provide year-round interest. In the springtime, they have this beautiful light green foliage, followed by some white flowers that become the fruit. Of course, that's the obvious thing that you love about them in the summertime. But then in fall, they make such a great ornamental feature all throughout the landscape because of the fall color, reds and oranges and burgundies. It's just such a beautiful plant. So there's no reason not to plant them, and no matter what part of the country you live in, chances are you can successfully grow them too.
You need 3 things: full sun, well-drained soil, and low pH, somewhere in the 4.0 to 5.0 range. Get those right, and you'll be in business with blueberries. One of my favorite things about blueberry plants is how long they'll keep going, often producing fruit for over 40 years. Keep in mind that they'll get anywhere from 18 inches to 15 feet tall, depending on the variety. And yes, there are many different varieties. In fact, to ensure good cross-pollination and a better yield of fruit, typically in the plant's second year, be sure to plant 2 or more different varieties in close proximity. You should get several quarts of berries per plant each year, but expect to lose some to birds and critters unless the plants themselves are protected. Apart from that, blueberry plants are pretty hands-off. You won't even have to prune them until after the 3rd year. So once you put it in the ground, the hardest part is over.
As gardeners, sooner or later we're dealing with pests, and it's probably sooner than later. And I'm talking about pests that either jump over the fence or crawl on top of the soil and dig in or come up from underneath. So how do you control those things? Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room first, and that is deer. Most of us are dealing with that issue. They can jump over a fence of 8 feet in height. So the only way you're going to keep a deer out is to have a physical barrier of at least that high. Now in my case, yes, I only have a 4-foot high fence, but I have a very confusing area to deer to look into this area to come in. They want a safe place to land, and they had bad depth perception. So from the outside looking in, this is not a safe place for them. And in the years that I've been here, I've never had a deer come in. So I know I'm pressing my luck, but so far so good. Now the pests that I'm dealing with are the ones that typically are coming on top of the soil and wanting to burrow or forage. And the best way that I've found to deal with that is livestock panel. Actually, what I use is goat panel. It's a smaller version where the squares are only 4 inches in spacing. And I lay that either into the soil or on top with blocks to prop it up off the soil. But I can tell you, that's keeping out chickens and squirrels and chipmunks and even cats that want to use it as a litter box, because it's a physical barrier that deters them and inhibits their freedom of movement in the soil, and it's worked fantastic. Now the other primary pests that want to come into your garden are either going to come in from underneath or try to crawl up into it. Primarily that's going to be moles and voles and gophers. And the solution to that problem is the same, and it's hardware cloth. So what is hardware cloth?
It's just stiff metal wire with squares spaced, in this case 1 inch apart, but if you wanted to go tighter on that, you could, like 1/2 inch. And it works really well as a physical barrier. That's the key. Now imagine for a moment that this is your raised bed. What this actually is a compost sifter. But you get the point, this is the frame of your raised bed. And underneath that, you can roll out the hardware cloth and staple it to the bed, and that's your physical barrier. And if you wanted to go extra safe, you could run this out beyond the perimeter, 6 inches or 12 inches or so, and that creates an extra layer of deterrent. So as the gophers coming into your bed area and they start digging there, they encounter the wire, and hopefully that's enough of a deterrent. But between that and the actual physical barrier within the bed, that's going to work. So what we're trying to do is come up with effective and inexpensive solutions. So hardware cloth, livestock panel or goat panel, or a tall fence, those are all going to work. They're very effective and they're not that expensive to implement as well.
The garden farm is planted out and ready for the growing season, and also ready to welcome in customers. Amy and I have put out the word, and today's the first day of on-site sales for her new heirloom tomato business.
Now, we have a couple of Arkansas travelers already, so I'm just going to come work down your list.
Yep.
I'd like to get a little lucky,
Okay.
and a lucky cross.
Gotcha. Little Lucky's going to be right. There's Lucky Swirl.
Our first customer is Phil, a neighbor who's picking out plants to grow at his own farm, so he can sell the tomatoes he'll harvest to customers of his own local CSA co-op.
I'm looking for Aunt Ruby's German Green,
Okay.
which is Carol Smith's favorite.
Oh, it is?
And I don't have enough of those.
Oh, good.
I don't have any of those.
Well, I think we're in the department for Aunt Ruby's German Green. I think we're right in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Is that
We
it?
are not going to take the one with the tag in it.
Over the course of a few weekends, we had a decent flow of customers come through. Amy got pretty good about showing off her plants and talking to gardeners about what would grow well in their conditions and meet their unique needs. And she certainly liked the little bit of money coming in too. In fact, the hardest part of selling tomato plants to mostly friends and neighbors was sticking to our prices and not giving out too many friends and family discounts. But that said, bartering and being a good neighbor is a critical part of every small business too, and Amy experienced it firsthand. But selling plants in our backyard was one thing. Setting up a shop at the local farmers market was always part of the plan too. In all, over the course of just the first month of business, Amy sold over 200 plants that she grew herself from seed and totaled almost $1,000 in sales. Getting the garden farm or any garden ready for the growing season is a lot of work. And adding to the challenge this year was getting Amy's organic tomato business off the ground and hopefully fostering a love of gardening in the process. Did it work, Amy?
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent. So whether you're growing vegetables just for your own kitchen or maybe you have your eyes on a bigger money-making endeavor, it all comes down to the prep work, some solid techniques, and a lot of patience. But it can be so worth it because what you end up growing could be a lot more than just a few tomatoes. If you'd like to learn more about getting your garden ready or watch this episode again, well, you can do that on our website under the show notes for this episode. And the website address, that's the same as our show name. It's growingagreenerworld.com. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Joe Lample, and we'll see you back here next time for more Growing a Greener World. All right, Amy, what can I do? Ah, you missed one. Good. I got something to do. Good job.